All right, real quick before we get into this video, guys, you need to find out if you have a factory amplifier or not. The beginning or the majority of this video is for vehicles that do not have a factory amplifier, and that's how I primarily wired this up. I took this out to the Jeep and connected everything, and I was getting everything to work except for the audio or the sound. So then I realized, okay, maybe I have a vehicle with a factory amplifier, the 2013 Jeep Patriot. So if you have one of those with a Boston acoustic sound system, then you're more than likely going to need to wire this up with a factory amplifier. And to do that, basically what you need to do now is use this white and blue wire that comes with the interface cable, and you're going to need to wire that up to your red accessory wire. Don't wire up to the battery, the yellow cable, because that's going to be constant on. What I prefer is that the radio and everything comes on when I turn the key. So that'll work with the ACC. I've already tested it. It does work that way. So now we're just going to make them permanent connections. Other than that, you're going to notice that you're not going to use many of the speaker wires anymore. You're just going to use the last four that you see on the interface connections here. And at the bottom, it has an important note. Vehicles that have a factory amplifier require that the front and left right speakers from the aftermarket radio, from this cable, be connected to the rear from the CH13 SWC CH1 harness, which is the interface harness. So make sure you follow that note and make sure you have everything connected. When I had this connected with everything connected as far as the speaker wires, I could not get the main door speakers to work, but all the other speakers are working and I could hear something. So I need to rewire those speaker wires as well. And so I'm going to do that right now. And to see this part of the video, just go to the end of the video, go down in the timeline and find that spot. If not, if you want to wire it up or if you need to wire it up as far as connections without a factory amplifier, just continue watching the beginning of the video. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Thank you for joining me here on this video. And in today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys this 13.3-inch universal radio that I got from Philosin off of their Amazon site. And right now I'm just going to show you what you need to do in order to get started. So I'm going to be installing this radio into a 2013 Jeep Patriot. So some of the things that you're going to need at least are some kind of vehicle adapter cable, which this is a radio interface. It retains all the factory functions. It even comes with this in order to keep your factory or your steering wheel controls and your factory controls as well with the universal radio. So pick yourself up one of these boxes for your specific type of vehicle. This I just got at Walmart, by the way. It was on clearance, so always check their clearance item. And this is what was inside of there. So you get the vehicle harness and everything that connects to all of the OEM original connectors. And then you have all of these extra accessory wires, which you'll need to connect to your radio unit. It also comes with another brown cable like this. And this is just going to be used for radios that needs a wire for SWC, it says. And yes, of course, you get this interface box in order to keep all of your settings or your functions of the OEM radio. Now, when you get your radio from Philosin here, the universal 13.3-inch universal radio, you get a whole bag of wire harnesses like this. And the only one you're going to need right now for the soldering or the connections is this cable right here, which is called the mainboard socket interface definition. That one will go over here on the left side or the far right side of the radio on the back. So each of these individual wires are actually tagged or labeled for what they are. So what you need to do is match up each one of these to the wire harness adapter for your OEM vehicle right here. So you can see they're eventually going to get all soldered together. I'll show you one of them and I'll do them all for you off camera, and then I will come back and show you what they look like. So before you get started, also take a look at the manual that comes with the adapter or the radio interface cable here. This shows you all of the pinouts. You just want to double check because these aren't labeled. I mean, the colors probably do match, but you just want to double check and make sure that they are correct according to what you have here. Okay? And then I have this printed out from Philosin. They gave me the pinouts of each of the wires that you receive, and then also the pinouts for all these connections, just to double check and make sure that you have things plugged in where they should be. So first thing here I notice is we're going to look here at the main harness pin definition, ground, for example. So this is from Philosin. And the ground, you can see it right here, it says G&D, G&D, and that's the ground. It says the node is the ground, right? If you come over here and follow now this pin out from the OEM interface, you see that the black wire, first one here, is ground, okay? So we find the black wire here, which is right there. Kind of get that out of the way. So now you have both of your black wires for the ground. Now I have one of these things here to help me solder two wires together. And so what I'm going to do is kind of get them twisted a little bit. So here's a tip for you guys. If you see what I've done here, I fanned out both wires here. And what you can do is kind of weave them in to each other like that, like to interlock them, and then squeeze them together and twist it a little bit, and you'll get a really good solder joint as well. So try that when you guys go ahead and solder these, if you plan on soldering them at all. If not, if you just plan to twist them and tape them, good luck. But you know, during vibrations and stuff like that, you might have issues with loose connections. And to make this really good and secure, what I have are these heat shrink tubings, which comes in really handy. Just buy one of these, probably off Amazon or Harbor Freight or whatever. Get yourself, I mean, I don't need this big, long, or this much length on these wires, right? So I'm just going to kind of estimate how much I'm going to need, which is probably about maybe 1.25 inches. So we'll cut it there. And then you can use that as a measurement for the next one. So now I have 3 pieces from one of those, right? So before I start soldering, I'm going to slide this on, because once you're soldered, you can't put it on anymore. So you just put that over, let it sit there for when you're done soldering, slide it over the joint, and then heat it up to shrink it around. Then I kind of pull them apart just to give that some tension there. Turn on your solder iron, by the way. Okay, get yourself some solder. This stuff here is called fine electrical rosin core solder. So it has some flux in the middle, so you shouldn't need any extra flux on this, right? So the solder iron is heated up. I'm just gonna clean it off a little bit. Now solder is gonna follow the heat, so just kind of touch the wires down here a little bit and see if you can get some solder in here to wick in between all of them. All nice and shiny. And there you have it. Your first solder joint is done. Kind of show you guys what that looks like. That is not coming apart now. Just take your heat shrink tubing and just kind of spin it over that solder joint just like that. And what you can use now is, if you got a lighter, go ahead and use a lighter to, don't burn it, but just give it enough heat so that it shrinks the tubing. But what I have is a cool little butane, hopefully there's butane in it, a butane torch in here, which is also like a soldering iron, but you can take off the tip and just use it as an air torch. Okay, it's hot. So take your heat source and just kind of go back over each side nice and slowly, get it nice, even shrinkage. Shrinkage on that. And when it's nice and shrunk and tight around there, you're done. So you're going to need to do that for each one of these cables here. I'm just going to go ahead and do them all, and then I'll come back to you guys just to show you if each color goes with each color on both wire harnesses. See you in a bit. All right, so I just finished all of the wiring and all of the heat shrinking around the wiring or the solder joints. But let's go ahead and check all of the wiring. Most of the colors do match up, by the way. And real quick here, the black and the yellow ones are thicker gauge wires, so make sure you use a little bit of a bigger heat shrink tubing for those. The other ones I was able to go back to a little bit of a smaller one. But all right, so the oranges are the illumination, that was correct. Here's one that's different. The brown one, which says back on from the Philosin cable, matches up to the green and purple. And the green and purple is the reverse signal. So back goes to the reverse signal. So that's one color mismatch that you will notice, at least for the Jeep 2013 wire harness, or the Chrysler, I guess, basically. And then the rest of them, what is this? This one is antenna. So the antenna is blue, or a really dark blue, and the other one is normal blue to me. So that matches red for the ACC. Get those out of the way. Then we have the gray and black ones, which is your front right minus signal for your speaker. Then you have the green and black, those match, rear left minus. And we have the purples, they match, rear right plus. Front right plus are the grays, and they match. The white and black stripe here, FL minus, those match. Front left plus, both are solid white, that matches. And then you've got your rear right minus, purple cable, those match. And the rear left plus, those also match in green. And there's a couple of wires that are remaining. It's key 1 and key 2. And I didn't know where they go to because the OEM Jeep interface harness here does not have any matching wires for it. The ones remaining will be a white and blue one, a pink and blue stripe, or pink stripe, blue color, and then a lighter green one. The lighter green one, according to the instructions here, is for the parking brake, and then the blue and pink is for the VSS/speed sense, and then the white and blue is not even used according to this. Those key 1 and key 2s don't match up with any of those, so I reached out to Philosin, and what they told me is that these are actually for steering wheel controls. And then I thought to myself again, hey, what? Maybe I remember seeing something like this on the radio, and the pinouts show 6 and 7 is SWC 1 and 2, and so steering wheel control matches with your key 1 and key 2. Inside of the OEM interface box here that you get from wherever you pick it up at, this brown cable, according to the manual, is actually for radios with SWC. So as you can see on the manual here, we've got, it's down here at the bottom, it's the 3.5 millimeter adapter for radios with a wire for SWC, steering wheel control. You have different options if you have a Boss one with SWC wire, which I don't. I've got a Bose or a Boston Acoustics sound system in the Jeep that was stock and came with the radio or the Jeep. And then we have a Kenwood JVC option, and Xite. We don't have that. And then we've got down the bottom Universal Radio. So we're just going to go off of that. And basically here it says key A, key-A or SWC-1 is brown. Key-B or SWC-2 is brown/white. And then you have a note here, after programming, assign the SWC buttons within the radio menu. So we're going to have to take a look at how we can get the radio controls to work once you have this plugged in, because this box is supposed to help you keep those settings. Otherwise, the Philosin radio is supposed to have radio controls in it as well. So what we're going to do then is we're going to wire up the brown wires with the Philosin's key 1 and key 2 wires. So we're going to need this. And we're going to need a couple of insulation or heat shrinks here. We're going to cut off approximate lengths of about an inch. Basically, if I cut these in thirds, they all are the perfect length. Okay, so we have a couple of those. I'm just going to go ahead and stick them on here so I don't forget later. Okay, and so let's turn on the solder iron while we're talking here. And right now in my hand I have the brown and white, and so if I come down here, it says brown/white is the SWC-2 or key B. So SWC-2, it's pin number 6. Let's just verify which color that is, and pin number 6 on the radio even tells you the pin out, so it's going to be the third one from the bottom. So 1, 2, 3. That's actually the green one. The green key. Where is it? Here you go. The green and white. So you can see here is the third wire. Key 2. SWC to, at least the 2 matches, and that goes to the brown/white. You don't really want to make too many mistakes, you know. Always verify just to make sure you're doing it right, because desoldering is a pain. So as before, I'm going to fan these out because that always helps get a good connection. Oops. Kind of weave them in together, and then what I do is I twist. And there you go. Some people I have seen will actually solder 2 wires like this. They'll wire them like that and then solder and then put the heat shrink over it. But this works as well too. Whatever you prefer and gets a good solder joint works. Okay, 600. Okay, there we go. 650 degrees is what I'm doing here. And then I just keep the iron on the wire and then just touch it with my solder, and then I drag the solder iron across all of the joint there, because solder will follow heat, and that's how you get nice smooth joints. So let's take this off, show you real quick. That's how they should look, nice and shiny. And then you'll slide up your tubing, your heat shrink tubing, and you'll heat it up later. At least I wait till I get all these done and then I do them all at once. All right, now we have the brown wire. Brown goes to SWC1, key 1. Okay, we'll take off this extra insulation. And these alligator clip holders really help a lot. Really help speed this up. All right, touch the wire, heat up the wire, and then put that solder in there. And then when the wire's hot, this solder will flow all in between those strands and you really get a good joint. So that's enough solder. Let's just heat it up evenly. Make sure the solder is flowed everywhere you need it. Okay. Oh, I got a solder peak. Or, yeah, little point there. Let's try to smooth that down so it doesn't poke through the heat shrink tubing. Okay, there you have it. Let's get my heat gun real quick. Now this is the fun part. Shrink, shrink, shrink. Shrinks really good here. If you put too large of a heat shrink tubing on, it's not going to shrink enough to get a nice good seal. Okay, and then let's do the other one. Okay, nice and tight, perfect. So there you have it. So just really quick here, guys, to talk about more on the steering wheel controls here. So if you remember when I soldered the key 1 and key 2 to this brown cable here for the adapter for the radios with SWC, you can also see that this wire here, this 3.5 millimeter jack, shows that it should be connected into an aftermarket radio, but features may vary, right? So since the Philosin radio does not have this, but it does have the key 1 to key 2 for your steering wheel controls, and those are connected to the brown wire, what you're going to need to do now is this becomes the jack, not the one on the radio. So take that 3.5 millimeter jack and just plug it into the adapter that came with the interface. So here it is, the brown cable that came with the interface. And this is the jack that came from the interface as well. Just plug that in and your steering wheel controls should then be able to be programmed. All right, and then the last one that we have to wire up still is the one for the parking brake detection, which is this cable right here. It is what is it called? Basically, it's the battery reverse IR ground. It's your camera input cable. So if you have a rear camera, that's what you're going to use, this right here. I think it makes sense to have the parking brake on here as well, so that when you put it in park, I guess maybe your camera would turn off. All right, you shouldn't be using scissors for this process, should be using wire strippers, but I'm being very careful. Barely cut it and then use your fingernail to just break it off and you're good without cutting any strands. Do not try this at home. Okay, so this parking detection, I did confirm it with Philosin. They did say that it is supposed to go to your light green wire from the interface cable. And your interface cable might be a little bit different, but they should all generally be the same. So it says light green is parking brake. I kind of protect the ones that I thought I'm not going to use with heat shrink tubing just at the tips to make sure they don't have any connections, but I'm going to need it. So that's easy to peel off of there. This wire is very stiff. I like those stiff wires, a little bit more robust. The ones from Philosin are very, very fragile, they seem. We have to put the insulation on. Good thing I remembered. And why do I keep calling it insulation? It's heat shrink tubing. Sorry. Every time I say insulation, more than likely I meant the heat shrink tubing. Okay, there we go. Fan these out pretty good here. Stick them in like that. Weave it, twist it. There we go. Okay, put it back in the fancy alligator clip holders. Oh, getting hot. By the way, if you don't have one of these fancy solder irons, a butane one like this is very convenient because it's mobile. You're not tied down to any cables or anything like that. You just have to refill it with butane every so often, but they do work well as solder irons. And I do like it anyway because it's very universal, or how do I say, flexible, because you have this option as well with the heat gun as well to help reflow solder even if you want it, or heat up tiny areas. All right, so now this cable, by the way, will plug into one of these slots. This black cable will plug into here, and these will go to your vehicle. All right, so with that, I think the hard part is done. The rest of this should be primarily plug and play. We'll go out to the Jeep and just show you how this is done. Plug these into the OEM vehicle. This will plug into here. This to the radio, this to the radio, and then whatever you need out of here will plug into the radio, but you won't need all of these if you're like me. Many of these are audio video cables that I'm not going to use. So with that, let's go out to the Jeep. All right, and we're back. And just to recap here, what I've done to wire up this connection with factory amplifier, what you need to do on the other one, it does say that the blue the blue and white is not used, but you will use it for when you are wiring up with a factory amplifier. And that's this blue and white one from the interface that gets soldered into the ACC cable of Philosin's main wire harness that comes with it. There was not an exact match for the blue and white, which on here it calls it out as the amplifier turn on. And so since there isn't one, you need to give this some voltage so that everything works right. And then I had to go back and cut some of these other speaker wires. And now these are not going to be used. For example, on the interface, the gray-black, gray, white, and white-black do not get used. And the ones on the Philosin's main harness, the RL plus or the green, the RL minus green-black, the purple, which is the RR plus, rear right plus, and the rear right minus purple black cable. So I just kind of tagged those off with some electro tape for now. That should hold instead of spending more time putting the heat shrink on the tips like I usually do. So those will not be used. I hope this works. If not, then we're gonna have to figure this out. But it does say in here that in the notes here, it's important. Vehicles that have a factory amplifier, so we do, I guess, require that the front, left, and right speakers from the aftermarket radio be connected to the rear speakers of this. So that's what I did, and now we have different color combinations. So the only speaker wires that you're going to need, according to that important note that's on here, all of the ones here on the interface side, these are all used to be rear speaker cables. So you need to plug in your front speaker cables from the main harness from Philosin to the rear connections on the interface. And you get to see that in the diagram, which I'll have posted as well. All right, other than that, that's all that needed to be done. Make sure that you plug in your cable here for the steering wheel control if you want that to work. And let's go out to the Jeep and tune into that video.